David Fincher's Zodiac rests on all of our top-of-the-year lists. This meticulously crafted thriller about obsession and the need to know the unknowable plays out like a great novel, filled with rich characters and engrossing multiple storylines. On Tuesday, the film receives the DVD treatment it so richly deserves, and a special 2-DVD director's cut featuring a plethora of enlightening extra features, including a commentary from the film's screenwriter, James Vanderbilt. With Zodiac, Mr. Vanderbilt has flawlessly crafted one of cinema's great screenplays. His resume is filled with additional outstanding work, including Darkness Falls, Basic, and The Rundown. We are truly honored to welcome this extraordinary screenwriter, Mr. James Vanderbilt, to our program. Mr. Vanderbilt, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. So great now that you've agreed to do the show. We're wonderful.
My pleasure. It's the first time I've ever heard anyone describe Basic or Darkness Falls as outstanding, so I that alone. I'm so excited.
Well, the check cleared. So,
yeah. Now tell me, Zodiac, we're crazy about this film. We've been campaigning for the film all year. This was a real dream project for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It was, something I'd read Robert Graysmith's first book when I was 15 in high school, and just kind of got really sort of sucked into it. And when I got out to Los Angeles and started actually getting work, I sort of inquired about the rights to it, and found out that Disney actually owned the rights already, and which made of course a lot of sense to me. But figured that was that, and I was never going to get to take a shot at it. And then a few years later, I was finishing up working on Basic with Brad Fisher, who's a producer at Phoenix Pictures, and he sort of said, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? And I told him about the book, and I sent him the book, and I said, but there's, there's no possible, way we'll get to do it because the rights are already sold. And he looked into it, and apparently by that time, Disney had sort of realized that they were, Disney and not going to make the movie, and let the rights lapse. And so that's sort of how we got into it. But yeah, about half my life I've been interested in doing this.
So when you pursue, when you read it, obviously it's a great murder mystery, it's a great detective story, but thematically, what about it spoke to you?
I think that when I first read it when I was 15 years old, I just sort of got off on the idea of this sort of this true life mystery. But then over the years, I think what I mean, it was a couple different things. I think the idea of obsession is pretty hardcore in the film, but I also I like the idea of Robert Graysmith is such a fun, wacky dude when you actually meet him. That came through. It doesn't come through as much in the book as it does when you actually sort of sit down with him and we put him in that. But there was something sort of really interesting about Zodiac is almost this kind of postmodern figure. It was interesting because I was a writer who's writing about a writer, Robert Graysmith,
sure,
who's kind of after this killer who's really more famous for writing all of these letters. I mean, when it comes to actual body count and doing horrible things, Zodiac's really, pretty minor. It's more how he marketed himself.
That's right.
Yeah. And using the press, and so that kind of really fascinated me. There's, about he made himself famous through more of his writing than his actual horrible deeds.
Well, I think that the movie is obviously it has comparisons to some of our great films. I mean, I see elements of All the President's Men and everything to JFK even in it. But did you use any films as kind of role models in your writing process?
I didn't. This one was really sort of an odd duck because, I'm a huge fan of All the President's Men and a huge fan of JFK, and I think, as a writer, there's no way to sort of, you can escape your influences only so much in terms of what's the stuff. William Goldman's one of those guys who made me want to be a writer. So,
yeah.
And Oliver Stone's one of those directors who, but we also, it was interesting during the whole process. We talked a lot about. We talked about both of those films, and we also, talked a lot about JFK, not wanting to be JFK, because JFK, and it is one of my favorite films, but it very much operates from the idea of this film exists to convince you, the viewer, of a particular premise.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to do exactly the opposite of that. We wanted to give you all of these sort of information, but we don't have a particular axe to grind in terms of convincing you that Arthur Lee Allen is the Zodiac. And so it was sort of, that doesn't mean that the characters whose story we're telling don't believe that. But we wanted to make sure that the film itself isn't trying to sell you a particular product in that way.
I see the JFK comparison in that the obsession with knowing the unknowable and how it takes over your life, and with All the President's Men, and this is the thing that I enjoyed so much about that film and particularly Zodiac, the excitement and the drama in seeing people working. I mean, oftentimes doing the most mundane kind of activities.
I'm a big fan of process movies. I sort of love getting caught up in pretty clearly the minutia of stuff, but how sort of and which is great about Fincher. Fincher loves that stuff too, and so I'm sort of fascinated with those scenes where you have to sit down. There's a great scene that we got to put back in for the director's cut, where Toschi and Armstrong, Mark Ruffalo and Anthony Edwards are sort of going through. They're going through all of the evidence they've sort of collected in order to get a search warrant for Arthur Lee Allen, and it's about a 3.5-minute scene of them sort of laying out their case. But what's sort of fascinating to me about it, and why we put it in the movie, is you've never really seen how much work cops have to go through to get a search warrant before.
Yeah.
And it's so I don't know. I'm sort of obsessed with that kind of that process thing as well, and also what it's like to work at a city paper, and that stuff in All the President's Men. So
it's not like Law and Order where they say get a warrant and then next scene it's like they've gotten a warrant and things have already been done.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny because I remember I don't know how old you guys are, but when Law and Order first started, everybody was like, oh wow, Law and Order's so amazing because it really shows you what the process is compared to what's come before, And even that, you only got an hour to tell it, so glosses.
But it took them a year to get a search warrant, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah. So tell me, when David Fincher came on board, he was obviously a first choice. This is the go-to guy for this kind of movie. How thrilling was that when he said, "Yeah, this is something that I want to do"?
It was really great. It sort of came about in stages. Obviously we sort of sent it to him first because it's if you do anything remote, we sort of assumed we have to show it to him. It's like asking the prettiest girl to prom, basically. She's going to say no, and then you can go about the actual work of finding a date. And so when he was like, no, I'd actually like to sit down, I was kind of rocked back on my heels by that. And, he was very, he grew up actually in Marin County, which we didn't know when we sent it to him. So he had a bit of a personal connection to the material and remembered when all this was kind of happening. He was about 8 or 9, so it's one of his sort of first memories. So I think we really got lucky just in terms of the subject matter. And but he was very sort of vocal about the fact that he's like, listen, I have no interest in making a serial killer. I've made my serial killer movie.
Sure.
I'm really interested in making a newspaper film.
Yeah.
And which we had a lot of elements of that already in the film, but we were sort of very excited about, that we weren't going to get someone who was going to be really excited to do sort of the very prurient, version of this.
So is that how the script kind of transformed once he came on board? It was a more meticulous look at the paper business and the police procedural aspect of it, or?
It was. What's interesting is actually I think. And God, I looked at the very first draft in so long. From my recollection, the script was more actually about the very first draft had more Graysmith in it, and Toschi wasn't as much of a character. And it's interesting because it actually sort of ended up going the opposite way. The police stuff actually expanded with David in it. But more of that process stuff, which I was sort of really excited. It was interesting because, for instance, there's in the film there's the whole sort of section with Melvin Belli and the Zodiac caller and all that, and that was in my original first draft, and I had cut it out to kind of get the length down because this is always we'd always have a problem with length on the film, and I'm actually really happy with it, but it was always. From the very beginning, we got to get it shorter and shorter and shorter. And so I took out this Melvin Belli section, and David read the movie and came onto the movie and was developing it. And one day I sort of said, there's this thing I cut out that was kind of interesting, and I've got about 20 seconds into describing it. And he goes, you got to put it back in.
Yeah.
So it's always, again, it was sort of, it was getting that stuff in that doesn't necessarily impact, because in reality, narratively, that scene goes nowhere. There's not a real Zodiac on the other end of the line. They don't learn anything about the case. So, from your sort of very typical studio textbook narrative standpoint, you get nothing out of that sequence other than it's interesting and that happened. But for sort of process junkies and guys who are excited about seeing how this case affected the San Francisco area and how it got blown up by the media, it's great stuff. So
it adds a great flavor to the film, particularly the way Brian Cox plays it.
Mm-hmm. He was fabulous. But
terrific.
That stuff he's and then he was the other thing that David did sort of during the process of reworking the script, and we did draft after draft after draft, but was really keep us honest on the research part of it. And we sat down with, over sort of the course of 18 months, as many people as we could who were still with us, and cops and both the surviving victims and.
I definitely want to ask you about those. Aaron, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious on a little technical thing. I mean, on the Melvin Belli thing, I just want to say the one thing that it teaches us, and it teaches the audience and the cops, is that they're going to get a lot of cranks coming out of the woodwork, is really what that scene illustrates. But what I'm curious about is, I know Robert Graysmith wrote 2 books on Zodiac, so I'm curious on the screenwriting process, was this a matter of synthesizing both books? And I know one of the books, Robert is very kind of just laying out all the facts, and then I think in the other book he starts interjecting himself into the narrative. So I was wondering, was it a matter of synthesizing his 2 books into the script, or did you lean?
It ended up sort of being that he doesn't in the first book he really, it's much more of a this happened and this happened and this happened. Mm-hmm. And the second book, he puts himself more into it, but the second book is also, written from the point of view is, the second book's called Zodiac Unmasked. So sort of right off the top, you figure he's gonna finger the guy he thinks is in. And so the second book's much more about the sort of history of Arthur Lee Allen and investigating that. And so there was an amalgam to it, but I mean, I would say, 70 to 80% of the movie came out of the first book.
Is there real quick, is there one incident, or because both of these books, I mean, they have such great detail and stories that you don't like the Melvin Belli and the killings and so forth. Was there one little incident from either one of these books that you wanted to put in, but time finally had to get cut? I mean, because you said it was always a matter of cutting down and scenes were being taken out and putting in, but was there one thing?
I mean, there were tons of things. There was some of the stuff at Lake Berryessa after Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Sheffer were stabbed. Brian actually managed to sort of chew off some of his ropes and try and go for help and made it about 50 feet. But I mean, sort of this Herculean effort to sort of save her. But it would have been, the scene wouldn't have ended right. I mean, there's I don't know. There's like a ton of different stuff. There's a ton of stuff about sort of Paul Avery. There's a great amount of stuff we never really. I feel like we never got. There was something really cool about the fact that Son of Sam was going on in New York by the time Robert had kind of come around to researching the Yellow Book, and we sort of get into the third, the last third of the movie where Graysmith really kind of takes the reins. The airwaves were actually dominated by all the Son of Sam things, so there was. I don't know.
Manson was about Manson was about the same time, 68, 69, or.
Oh, absolutely.
And
there were a lot of just Zodiac theories that we never. I mean, there were a lot of letters we couldn't sort of read. There's a sort of dearth of material. He sent maps and clues with radians, and that we could never. It just never really, got in there. There was stuff that we. made sure was in there that normally, like I said, the Melvin Belli stuff, I think in a sort of in a different movie that never would have made it in, the Kathleen John stuff with the baby, we really wanted to make sure it was in.
Right.
There was never, that was the great sort of thing about David, though. There was never like a huge chunk of stuff that I thought was really, important that we didn't get to put in, because he was always like, listen, I'll make it work. I remember he called me up and he said, don't worry about writing a 250-page draft on this one.
It's a very, very generous, you don't feel like anything's missing, and the film feels like it takes its time, and which is so rare nowadays.
No, I mean, and I'm also one of those people who, I will totally look at my watch, while watching a movie if I don't feel like it's keeping me there. So, I feel like if every minute you go over 2 hours, you really have to earn in a feature film. So, I was sort of terrified of doing a movie this long, and terrified of sort of exhausting people and boring people, because I think there is a lot of, I sort of feel like, in the last 5 years, movies have gotten longer and more self-indulgent in times, and I, didn't want to do that. So, but I think, with a guy like Fincher doing it, at least for me, pacing, isn't an issue in the film, and it keeps you interested, hopefully.
Once you begin to work with Fincher, obviously he's very collaborative from what you've told me, but does he welcome you on the set? Is it a close collaboration once shooting begins?
It is. I wasn't on the set that much because he's very much of, first of all, I just, set gets very boring. I mean, it's, I was like, I used to, my first movie, I was like, oh, it's going to be so exciting, I'll be on set. And then you get to set, and I'd been on sets before, just like visiting and stuff, but you have, it's either you have absolutely nothing to do as the writer, or you have a lot to do, in which case you're in real trouble, if you're rewriting on set.
Yeah.
Which is a situation I've been in, and is not fun either. So, with this, I was there about a third of the time, I would say, and would just kind of go up. But he, the actors he doesn't run a set where the actors change their lines very much. He does, if they're turning to you and kind of going, can we change this? Can we change that? He doesn't like that. He wants to do the work, before you get onto the stage.
Right. Sure.
The script should be locked, and my job should be done, and that's pretty much how it worked out on this. Which was
there's a couple of additional things I want to talk to you about, but your DVD commentary is great.
Oh, good.
In this new package.
I heard it, yeah.
And surprisingly, James Ellroy joins you. How did that participation come about?
He was, Ellroy's, and he's one of my heroes. I mean, he's an amazing guy, and he and Brad Fisher were working on something, and he called me up about, and we were just sort of finishing Zodiac, and Fisher called me up and said, "You want to have dinner with James Ellroy?" And I said, yeah. And we sort of talked about Zodiac, and then we showed him the movie about a month before it came out, just because, it's true crime, and it's James Ellroy, and, do you want to see the flick? And he really, I don't think I'm overstating it, he flipped out for it. Was really excited, and told us he liked it more than Black Dahlia, which made me really excited. And
a far better film. Oh, got light years ahead of that.
Yeah.
So, and just he really got into it, and was just such a big supporter, and through he got nothing out of this, and so when it came time to do the commentary, I think if James Ellroy wants to do a commentary on your movie, you say yes.
Absolutely, and he really had a firm understanding of what the film was. Obviously,
absolutely,
he's a brilliant guy.
He got what we were going for immediately, which was really cool.
Yeah.
It's nice to get one of your heroes go. You wrote the hell out of this.
That's got to be satisfying. Yeah. And I'm not lying. I think it's the best screenplay, certainly of this past year.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's stunning work, and I'm sure that award nominations and things. And I needed to ask you about that because obviously you're a writer, and we're in the middle of a writer's strike.
Mm-hmm.
What's the sense you get? What's the morale like among the writers?
Oh, I think the morale's actually pretty good. I mean, I mean, it's sort of compared to what? I mean, nobody's thrilled. Everybody wants to go back to work, but
sure.
It's sort of a situation where I feel like, in a weird way, the studios have made it very easy to be okay with being on strike. You know, nobody's happy with it, but I mean, I haven't talked to anybody who thinks that any of the sort of the offers or anything that's come along is something the Writers Guild should have taken. And it's
right.
It's some pretty important stuff, you know, I feel that we're on strike for. So I think everybody's bummed and everybody would love to go back to work, but you know, nobody's going, no, we let's just take the deal. Come on, it's fine.
Right.
So,
does there seem to be any inkling of a promise yet that they will relinquish some of what they're holding on to for dear life?
I think so. I mean, I think it's, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, and you know, you can see that there's some great stuff, you know, online and, you know, different little videos and stuff. But
yeah.
I mean, you know, everybody and their mother knows that you know, the internet is the next, you know, biggest frontier, and everybody knows that there's money that's going to be made off of it, and you know, studios are very, very excited to start doing that, you know, and you know, you can go and watch an episode of The Office for free and have to watch commercials on it on the website, and you know, the guys who created The Office don't get paid for it, and that's messed up.
There's something inherently unfair about that.
And the other thing is too, I mean, you know, and our you know, our town is a small town, it's a small business. I have friends who work at studios and stuff like that, and not one of them really thinks that writers don't deserve a piece of that. You know what I mean? It's just about working at that formula out. So eventually, you know, the world will continue to spin. We'll go back to work. It's just a question of, you know, will it be in time to see that back 8 episodes of Lost or not? You know,
right.
So, like,
yeah. In the meantime, you guys are committed to the Writers Guild. They're committed to the SAG Awards, correct? But not the Globes or the Oscars. Is that what's happening on the awards?
I believe so. Yeah, and they're committed to the SAG Awards. I believe chiefly, and I'm not involved in the negotiating committees or anything like that.
Right.
Chiefly because SAG has been such a great, you know, strong ally in this. I think it would be kind of a dick move to be like, sorry guys, you know.
Yeah. At the same time, you've got, once this writer strike ends, you've got some great upcoming projects it seems you're attached to.
I'm very, very excited.
I saw something about, and you can confirm or deny, I saw something about Against All Enemies and Spider-Man 4. Is that true?
No, I'm Against All Enemies is actually a script I'm sort of done on it now, but or was, you know, done with it before the strike, but it's Robert Redford's going to direct it. It's an adaptation of
the Richard
Clark's book.
Yeah. I've heard that Sean Penn is in talks for Richard Clark. Do you know anything about that?
I actually don't. I don't really know where they are sort of on casting. Again, it's sort of, you know, since the strike came down, I'm pretty well out of it.
And Spider-Man 4, I mean, that's quite a behemoth. That's quite a project.
Yeah, that is.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. I went in on that and you know, I really love the films and you know,
what's that phone call like where they're like, how would you like to write Spider-Man 4?
It's pretty much that. I went in and sat in a room with you know, it's sort of an odd process because you are sort of sitting down with you know, people who made the first 3 and going, well, let me tell you what to do, which is always odd. But I was lucky enough for them to be interested in me, and I'm a huge fan of those movies, and so we sort of closed that up right before the strike, and once the strike's over, I get to go to work.